The boarding pass hits the floor as security drags her away. Dr. Amara Williams, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, worth more than most people's monthly salary, watches her first-class boarding pass flutter to the gate floor as two security guards firmly escort her from the jet bridge. Fellow passengers stare in a mixture of shock and embarrassment, some recording on phones while others whisper among themselves, creating a scene that will soon become a national conversation about power, prejudice, and corporate accountability. The irony is delicious. The woman being removed as a security threat actually controls the security systems for the entire aircraft. Comment below where you're watching from as we dive into this incredible story of justice served. Ice cold. Gate agent Jennifer Morrison smirks with satisfaction, arms crossed like a conquering general, believing she has successfully removed what she considers an undesirable passenger from her flight. The 40-something blonde has perfected this particular power play over her 15-year career, using company policies as weapons to enforce her personal biases. The plane, Flight 447 to New York, sits ready for departure with engines humming ominously, completely unaware that the woman being escorted away holds the power to ground it indefinitely with a single phone call. Morrison has no idea that her moment of perceived triumph will become her career's final act. Broadcast to millions and studied in business schools as a masterclass in corporate accountability, she's about to discover that some battles are won by choosing when to reveal your true power rather than flexing it immediately. 30 minutes earlier, Dr. Amara Williams had approached Gate B12 with a quiet confidence that comes from closing deals worth more than most small countries' GDP. She had just left a board meeting that secured a $2.3 billion aviation contract, the largest in her company's 30-year history, making SkyTech Aviation Solutions the undisputed leader in airline fleet management systems. Her Hermes briefcase, worth more than Morrison's monthly salary, and designer heels clicked against polished airport tiles as she made her way through Chicago O'Hare's busy terminal. She was running slightly late, but remained composed, carrying herself with the quiet authority that comes from controlling technology that keeps thousands of aircraft operational across North America. She represented everything that made certain people uncomfortable. A successful black woman in spaces traditionally reserved for others, carrying herself with dignity that challenged every stereotype about who belonged in positions of power. Morrison, a 15-year veteran gate agent with bottled blonde highlights and an attitude that screamed small authority, big ego, immediately noticed Amara approaching the premium boarding lane. Her expression shifted from professional boredom to active suspicion as she observed Amara's expensive attire with the kind of scrutiny typically reserved for suspected shoplifters in high-end stores. The gate agent had perfected this particular dance over the years, using security protocols and documentation concerns to establish hierarchies that had absolutely nothing to do with actual security and everything to do with maintaining her perceived social order. Morrison's eyes narrowed as she prepared to demonstrate who really controlled access to first class, completely unaware that she was about to challenge someone who controlled the very computer systems that kept planes in the air. In her small world, she was the gatekeeper. In the real world, she was about to meet the gate owner. "First class?" Morrison asked, her voice dripping with skepticism as she examined Amara's boarding pass like it was counterfeit currency, turning it over multiple times and checking the barcode against her screen with theatrical suspicion. Other first-class passengers, predominantly white business travelers, flowed through the line without similar inspection. Their legitimacy never questioned. Their right to premium seating never challenged. Morrison studied the pass longer than necessary, creating an artificial delay designed to establish Amara as suspicious, different, someone who needed extra verification to justify her presence in first class. "Seat 2A," Amara confirmed politely, maintaining steady eye contact while internally recognizing the familiar choreography of discrimination that she had encountered countless times throughout her career climb from junior analyst to CEO. She had learned long ago that maintaining dignity in the face of such blatant disrespect often revealed more about the perpetrator than any angry response ever could. Morrison's performance was nothing new. Amara had faced similar challenges in boardrooms filled with men who questioned her presence, at conferences where she was assumed to be someone's assistant rather than the keynote speaker, and in exclusive clubs where her membership was treated as an anomaly requiring explanation. What Morrison didn't know was that this particular performance was being conducted in front of someone whose signature appeared on contracts worth more than the gate agent's lifetime earnings. Morrison called over her supervisor, Marcus Webb, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and the perpetually tired expression of someone who had given up on professional growth decades ago. Webb approached with visible annoyance, his body language immediately telegraphing that he considered this interruption beneath his attention and probably unnecessary. "Problem here?" Webb asked, in a tone that suggested he already knew the answer and supported whatever conclusion Morrison had reached, not bothering to look at Amara directly, but instead addressing Morrison as if the passenger in question was merely an object to be processed, rather than a human being deserving of basic respect. The supervisor's casual dismissal of Amara's presence spoke volumes about the culture that had been allowed to flourish under his leadership. A culture where discrimination was not only tolerated but actively encouraged through willful blindness and deliberate ignorance. "Just verifying documentation," Morrison explained with false concern, her voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, deliberately creating a spectacle designed to maximize Amara's embarrassment. "You know how it is these days," she added with a knowing look that suggested shared understanding about the need to be suspicious of certain types of passengers. Morrison's performance was carefully calculated to suggest that Amara's presence in first class was inherently suspicious, that someone who looked like her required additional scrutiny to justify access to premium services. Amara's jaw tightened imperceptibly as she recognized the coded language and systematic delays designed to establish her as other, different, someone who didn't belong. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant confirming that Flight 447 had been cleared for early departure with all systems showing green, a message that carried more irony than her assistant could possibly know. The woman being subjected to discriminatory treatment at the gate was the same person whose company controlled the very systems that kept the aircraft operational, a fact that would soon reshape everything about this encounter. Webb reluctantly examined Amara's boarding pass and identification, his reluctance to find everything in order evident in his disappointed expression when he was forced to admit that all documentation appeared legitimate. Morrison's fingers were already typing something on her computer, setting in motion a chain of events that would escalate far beyond what either she or Webb could imagine. The gate agent's determination to find a problem where none existed was about to create consequences that would reverberate throughout the entire aviation industry. As Amara walked down the jet bridge toward the aircraft, Morrison picked up her phone and dialed security, speaking in hushed but urgent tones that carried the practiced efficiency of someone who had made similar calls before. "We have a potential situation at Gate B12, she reported, painting Amara as a security threat despite having no evidence beyond her own prejudices. "Suspicious passenger behavior, possible document irregularities. She's already boarded." The fabricated emergency was designed to justify the humiliation that Morrison was determined to orchestrate, regardless of the facts or the passenger's actual behavior. Flight attendant Ashley Chen greeted Amara warmly as she entered the cabin, her genuine professionalism providing a stark contrast to the treatment Amara had received at the gate. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Williams. May I take your coat?" Chen asked with the kind of respect that should have been standard throughout the boarding process. Amara settled into seat 2A, placing her briefcase in the overhead compartment while checking the flight manifest on her phone. Her company's fleet management system providing real-time passenger data that showed the flight was completely booked, with 180 passengers total. 3 minutes later, 2 airport security officers boarded the aircraft, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere in the cabin as conversations died and passengers turned to watch the unfolding drama. Lead Officer David Park approached Amara's seat with professional courtesy, his demeanor suggesting that he was uncomfortable with the situation, but bound by protocol to investigate reported security concerns. His partner, Officer Williams, positioned himself nearby with a more confrontational stance that suggested he was more aligned with Morrison's version of events. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," Park said quietly, trying to minimize the scene while following proper procedures. "There's been a question about your boarding credentials." The business class cabin fell completely silent as passengers strained to hear the conversation, phones emerging as people began recording what they sensed might become a significant incident. Amara looked up from her tablet, where she had been reviewing SkyTech's quarterly aviation safety reports. The irony of reading about airline safety standards while being subjected to discriminatory treatment not lost on her. "I'm sorry, what kind of question?" Amara asked calmly, her voice carrying the controlled authority of someone accustomed to dealing with challenges to her legitimacy. Officer Park explained that the gate agent had reported suspicious behavior and potential documentation issues, claims that required investigation off the aircraft. The fabricated emergency was proceeding exactly as Morrison had planned, with Amara being removed from the plane based on nothing more than prejudicial assumptions about who belonged in first class. Amara could have revealed her identity immediately, could have demanded to speak with airline management, or flashed her CEO credentials to end the humiliation. But something deeper was at play here. A systematic problem that revealing her power wouldn't solve. A culture of discrimination that needed to be exposed and addressed, rather than simply bypassed through executive privilege. Instead, she stood gracefully and agreed to accompany the officers, already formulating a response that would address not just her individual mistreatment, but the broader issues that allowed such discrimination to flourish. Back at Gate B12, Morrison orchestrated the public humiliation with the practiced efficiency of someone who had turned discrimination into an art form, gathering airline staff and creating maximum visibility for what she clearly intended as a lesson about knowing one's place in society. She spread Amara's personal belongings across the counter like evidence at a crime scene, handling each item with theatrical suspicion while a crowd of curious passengers gathered to watch the spectacle unfold. Morrison examined business cards printed on premium cardstock, the latest iPad Pro, and a leather portfolio containing contracts that could fund small cities, each item scrutinized with exaggerated suspicion, designed to suggest that expensive items carried by a black woman were somehow inherently suspicious and probably stolen. The performance reached peak absurdity as Morrison held up items to the light as if checking for watermarks on counterfeit currency, her every gesture calculated to maximize embarrassment and establish her authority over someone she perceived as an imposter in expensive clothing. Dr. Amara Williams, Chief Executive Officer, SkyTech Aviation Solutions, Morrison read aloud from a business card, her voice dripping with mock surprise and disbelief. "Very impressive titles," she added with a smirk that suggested such credentials were obviously fabricated. Webb joined the performance, adding his own commentary about how easy it was to print fake business cards and create false identities, their collaborative effort to discredit Amara proceeding exactly as they had planned. Morrison announced that she would need to verify Amara's credentials through official channels, deliberately avoiding the corporate travel database that would immediately confirm her executive status. The gate agent's performance was reaching its intended climax as she loudly declared that corporate impersonation was a federal crime, the accusation hanging in the air like a weapon designed to justify whatever humiliation would follow. The crowd of onlookers grew larger as Morrison's theatrical investigation continued, phones recording every moment of what was rapidly becoming a viral incident. Officer Park looked increasingly uncomfortable with the theatrics, his professional instincts telling him that something was fundamentally wrong with the situation, but Morrison's confident assertions about security threats kept him following protocol. Amara maintained her composure throughout the ordeal, her calm demeanor in the face of such blatant discrimination only serving to highlight the absurdity of the accusations being leveled against her. The contrast between Morrison's frantic accusations and Amara's dignified responses was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone present. In a quiet corridor 20 yards away from the gate area, Amara made a decision that would reshape everything about the incident and demonstrate the power of strategic patience over immediate gratification. She asked Officer Park for permission to make one phone call to verify her identity, a request that seemed perfectly reasonable given the circumstances and accusations that had been leveled against her. Park, increasingly convinced that Morrison had overreacted to a situation that never warranted security intervention, readily agreed to the request while privately questioning how a routine boarding process had escalated into a federal incident. Amara dialed a number from memory, her fingers steady despite the humiliation she had just endured, connecting immediately to SkyTech Emergency Operations, where her voice would trigger protocols that would ground flights across the country if necessary. SkyTech Emergency Operations, this is Commander Sarah Rodriguez, came the crisp, professional response that carried the authority of someone accustomed to handling genuine aviation emergencies. Amara provided her authentication code and requested an immediate system lockdown for Flight 447, explaining that she needed the aircraft grounded pending resolution of a discrimination incident that could expose the company to significant liability. Rodriguez confirmed the order without hesitation, her training dictating immediate compliance with CEO directives regardless of the circumstances, implementing a complete lockdown that would prevent the aircraft from starting engines, engaging navigation systems, or departing until further notice. The conversation was conducted on speakerphone at Amara's request, allowing Officer Park to witness the demonstration of corporate power that was about to reshape the entire situation and turn Morrison's triumph into her worst nightmare. "Ma'am, that's 180 passengers and a $2.3 million operational disruption," Rodriguez confirmed. "Authorization, CEO Override Protocol 7, Flight 447 is officially grounded." Officer Park's eyes widened as he processed what he was witnessing, the realization dawning that the woman Morrison had accused of fraud was actually exactly who she claimed to be. Amara also requested that Chicago O'Hare Operations be contacted immediately about the discrimination incident, setting in motion a cascade of corporate accountability that would soon reach the highest levels of airline management. Through the security office window, they could see Gate B-12 erupting in chaos as ground crew swarmed the aircraft and Morrison frantically worked her computer while fielding increasingly urgent phone calls. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the airport intercom announcing a mandatory maintenance delay for Flight 447, the euphemistic language barely concealing the reality that the aircraft had been deliberately grounded by the same person Morrison had just humiliated. Amara's phone rang with a call from O'Hare Operations, the caller ID showing the desperation of airline management suddenly realizing the magnitude of their problem. Operations Manager Jennifer Liu's voice trembled with the recognition of corporate power as she attempted damage control over the phone. "Dr. Williams, this is Jennifer Liu, O'Hare Operations Manager. We have an unusual situation developing," she said, her carefully diplomatic language unable to hide the panic in her voice. Amara calmly explained that her company's CEO had been subjected to discriminatory treatment by airline personnel, resulting in the implementation of emergency protocols that would keep the aircraft grounded until the situation was resolved. At Gate B-12, Morrison's confident demeanor crumbled as Captain Rodriguez emerged from the jet bridge with a grim expression, approaching her desk with the purposeful stride of someone bearing bad news. Morrison's phone rang constantly as various airline departments tried to understand why Flight 447 had suddenly become inoperational, the gate agent's earlier triumph transforming into mounting panic, as she realized that her actions had triggered consequences far beyond her control or understanding. Liu arrived at the gate like a diplomatic crisis negotiator, flanked by senior airline executives and accompanied by the airport's customer relations director, their collective presence signaling the severity of the situation that Morrison's discrimination had created. The growing crowd of stranded passengers parted as Liu approached Morrison's desk, her official demeanor making clear that this was no longer a routine gate issue, but a corporate crisis requiring immediate executive intervention. "Jennifer Morrison," Liu announced formally, her voice carrying across the gate area. "You are relieved of duty pending immediate investigation." The words hit Morrison like a physical blow as the reality of her situation began to sink in, her discriminatory actions having escalated into a career-ending incident with national implications. Webb attempted to offer support, but Liu quickly informed him that he was also suspended, pending review of his supervisory failures in allowing systematic discrimination to flourish under his management. Dr. Williams returned to Gate B12 to address the crowd of stranded passengers, her presence commanding immediate attention as she prepared to transform the incident from personal humiliation into a teachable moment about corporate accountability and systematic change. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who controlled billions in aviation contracts. "I want to thank you for your patience during this delay, which was necessary to address systematic discrimination that occurred here today." The crowd listened in stunned silence as Amara explained her identity and the reasons for grounding the aircraft, her measured explanation turning individual prejudice into a broader conversation about corporate responsibility and systematic change. Several passengers who had witnessed the original incident nodded knowingly, their recordings of Morrison's discriminatory behavior providing documentation that would soon become crucial evidence in the investigation that followed. Additionally, Amara announced, SkyTech will be reviewing all of our airline partnerships to ensure our contractors maintain standards consistent with our corporate values. The implicit threat was clear to everyone present, particularly the airline executives who understood that losing SkyTech's technology contracts would mean immediate operational shutdown. The power dynamic had completely reversed from Morrison's earlier performance, with corporate accountability replacing individual prejudice as the driving force of events. Captain Rodriguez offered to prepare the aircraft for immediate departure if Amara was willing to reboard, but she declined, choosing to take the next flight while ensuring that every passenger received appropriate compensation for the delay her necessary actions had caused. The gesture of corporate responsibility resonated with the stranded passengers, many of whom began applauding her decision to prioritize systematic change over personal convenience. Within hours, the incident had triggered a cascade of corporate and legal consequences that would reshape aviation industry practices and establish new standards for addressing systematic discrimination in commercial travel worldwide. Morrison faced immediate termination, potential federal civil rights charges, and the kind of social media infamy that makes people unemployable across entire industries. Webb confronted similar consequences for his supervisory negligence in allowing discriminatory practices to flourish under his management, his career ending not with retirement but with termination for cause. The airline initiated emergency policy reviews, implemented mandatory bias training for all customer-facing personnel, and established real-time monitoring systems to prevent future incidents. Insurance companies began requiring discrimination prevention protocols as conditions for coverage, recognizing that bias incidents could trigger millions in damages and contract cancellations. Dr. Williams established the Inclusive Travel Initiative, a $50 million fund providing legal support for discrimination victims and partnering with civil rights organizations to monitor airline behavior industry-wide. The initiative's first case involved supporting a Latino family removed from a flight for speaking too loudly in Spanish, demonstrating that Morrison's actions were part of a broader pattern of systematic discrimination that required corporate intervention to address effectively. 6 months later, Morrison sat in an unemployment office in a different state, her discriminatory actions having made her not just unemployable in the aviation industry, but nationally recognizable for all the wrong reasons. Her face had become synonymous with workplace discrimination, featured in corporate training videos as an example of how personal prejudice could destroy entire careers in minutes. Webb faced similar consequences, his career destroyed by his failure to address systematic discrimination under his supervision, his pension reduced due to termination for cause rather than retirement. Their downfall served as a powerful deterrent to other airline personnel who might consider similar discriminatory actions, with industry magazines publishing detailed case studies of how 15 minutes of prejudice had cost two people their entire professional futures. The ripple effects extended to their families, friends, and former colleagues, creating a cautionary tale that spread throughout the service industry about the real costs of discrimination in the modern corporate world. The aviation industry underwent unprecedented transformation as major airlines adopted the SkyTech standard for diversity and inclusion, implementing comprehensive audits, real-time incident reporting systems, and executive accountability measures. The Federal Aviation Administration mandated bias training for all customer-facing personnel, with Dr. Williams's incident serving as the primary case study for recognizing and preventing discrimination in commercial aviation. 1 year later, Dr. Williams boarded Flight 447 from the same gate, same route, same first-class seat, but everything else had changed fundamentally. Gate agent Maria Santos greeted her warmly, with the professional respect that should have been standard from the beginning, while diverse travelers moved through premium sections without the scrutinizing stares that once marked their presence as unusual. The transformation was complete, systematic change having replaced individual prejudice as the standard operating procedure. As her flight took off smoothly, Dr. Williams reflected on how 15 minutes of strategic action had created lasting industry-wide change, proving that corporate power, when aligned with moral purpose, could achieve social progress that generations of traditional advocacy hadn't accomplished. Her phone displayed messages about the latest discrimination settlement supported by the Inclusive Travel Initiative, evidence that the work of systematic change continued to expand and evolve. The story of Dr. Amara Williams serves as a powerful reminder that when corporations have the ability to enforce justice, staying silent becomes complicity in oppression. Her strategic use of economic leverage to address systematic discrimination created ripple effects throughout multiple industries, demonstrating that corporate accountability can be a powerful force for social change when wielded by leaders committed to justice over profit. Morrison's downfall and the airline industry's transformation prove that discrimination always has consequences, though they may be delayed until someone with sufficient power decides to enforce accountability. The incident established legal precedent for corporate partnership accountability in discrimination cases and inspired similar policies across multiple industries, showing that one strategic response to injustice can create systematic change that benefits countless future victims. Power without purpose is meaningless, but purpose with power can change the world in 15 minutes. Dr. Williams' story demonstrates that the most effective response to systematic discrimination is not individual outrage, but strategic action that addresses root causes and creates lasting institutional change. When those with corporate leverage choose to use it for justice, entire industries can transform overnight, proving that economic power remains one of the most effective tools for enforcing civil rights in modern America.